Godot StyleBoxes are used to build UIs for your games. And while they are very powerful, we can also improve them with some simple changes. So let's explore how they work and expand their functionality by making a custom stackable StyleBox, and more. StyleBoxes are mainly used in panels and control nodes. So let's start by adding one to the scene and see what we have to work with. The first step is to open Theme Overrides, Style section, and create a new instance for the panel variable. Here we have several types of StyleBoxes, but let's focus on the StyleBoxFlat first. This will create a background color for the panel area, but it also has several other options that we can play around with. We can change the background color, add a pixel border in any direction independently, and change its color too. Then we can change the square corner to make it more rounded, and just like that, we have a decent looking panel. It's super easy to use and extremely helpful. And with some creativity, we can make it look like a pressable button. You can do that by adding a border only on the bottom section of the panel, and using a darker color here. And there it is, a button-looking UI. Then we have expand margins. This is actually very useful. It will expand what is drawn outside of the nodes area, so as we increase these, it will be drawn outside of the orange selection lines. We can also add a very simple vertex shadow, and the ability to add anti-aliasing to our rect. We'll talk about the content margins a bit later, but they are very useful for buttons. Now, let's add our UI node to a grid container. Set its minimum size to 80 by 30 and duplicate it a few times. The grid container will automatically place the nodes in the grid, and you can set how many pixels of separation they have here. I'll set them to 5 and 5. Now, one important thing to notice when using expand margins is that they are not taken into consideration when arranging the nodes. So if we expand the margins high enough, they will overflow into its neighboring nodes. They are typically used to put the borders outside of the node selection area. But now that we know what StyleBoxes are and what they can do, let's start making some improvements to them. The first thing we can do is make them accept negative expand margins. That can be very useful to create internal margins for the background, and will also help us later. And we'll be doing that by creating our own StyleBox. So let's create a folder named Custom StyleBoxes and create a new script here. Click to change its inherit type and choose the StyleBoxFlat. We'll call this StyleBoxFlat Plus. First we need to add an add-to decorator so it can work in the inspector. This class is not meant to be extended in GTScript, so there is very little we can do here. We'll have to be creative. We are going to create an export variable called margin bottom of type int and create a setter for it. Inside here, we'll set the variable as usual, but also change the expand margin bottom as well. The expand margins is only locked to 0 inside the inspector, so changing it here will make it work. And finally, let's name our class StyleBoxFlat Plus. Make sure to save the file, and now we can see our new class here. Let's pick it and quickly redo the modifications. Set the color to green, pick the border color, and set in the corner radius. And now, while we still can't change the bottom margin below 0, we can change our new variable at the top. And we get a negative bottom margin, adding a margin inside the selection area. Now we just need to do the same for the other sides. So we'll duplicate this code 3 times and rename the margin for each of the sides. The left one, the top one, and the right one. Save the file, and now if we close and open the StyleBox again, it will refresh the inspector, and now we have all the margins there. And to make it a bit better, let's create an export group named negative expand margins with the prefix of margin underscore. This will change the display name of the variables below and hide the margin word from their names. And lastly, we can change it to export custom with the property hint none and the suffix of pixels. And repeat that to the other ones. Now our new group looks the same as the others, with the pixel suffix attached to them, and we can now have all the negative borders we want. Now let's take the panel outside of the grid box and delete that. We are now going to create our own stacked StyleBox, which is going to be able to stack multiple StyleBoxes together. So let's create a new script. And for its type, we are going to use the base StyleBox class, but we can't actually select it from here. So select any of them for now, and let's name this StyleBoxStacked. Now you can simply change the extents class to StyleBox, and it will work as intended. Let's not forget to add the tool modifier and the class name StyleBoxStacked. Now, before we proceed, let's take a quick look on how the StyleBox class works. Here is another StyleBox class. The StyleBox gives us a draw function that is called whenever the UI needs to be updated. This will draw the texture that is going to be used for the StyleBox. But as you might have noticed, this draw function is a bit different than the Node2D draw. Because StyleBoxes are resources, we don't have access to nodes, and we are going to need to draw things by using the rendering server. This is a more low-level way of drawing things in Godot, and it is what Node2D uses internally. But it is easier than you might think. Our draw function gives us the RID of the node that has it, and the rect gives us the node's area. So, in order to draw anything, we can use the rendering server .canvas item add, and any of those functions can be used to draw here. These functions that have the add named into them are immediate draw functions, so there is not a need to save reference to them. They simply draw things to a texture. But anyways, to add a circle, we need to give the RID to canvas item of the node we are drawing to, the local position of the drawing, the circle radius, and the color. And like that, we have a circle on the top left of our rect. We can increment its position by the radius size to put it inside the rect, and add another circle to the other side by using the rect.size.x as the position. And by reducing its x position by the radius here, we put it inside the rect. Finally, let's create a square just to showcase a very useful function of the rect when creating UIs. So let's create a canvas item add rect to draw a rectangle over the node. And now the panel is fully black. But we can easily add margins all around by using the rect.grow function. This will decrease all sizes of the rect by the amount we give, and you can also use grow individual or grow side for a more precise control. And now our rect has margins all around. But that's it for the basics of drawing inside StyleBoxes. The StyleBoxFlat we used is built much the same, just a bunch of overlaid rectangles with lots of options that changes their configuration. Now, let's go back to making our stacked StyleBox. So first, let's create an export variable, StyleBoxes, to hold an array of StyleBox that we are going to render. Then, inside the draw function, we just need to go over the array and call their draw function if they exist. Since we are giving them our toCanvas item RID, they will be correctly drawn and everything will work. Save the file and let's see if it works. I'll duplicate our node so we can compare the changes. Now, let's create a new StyleBoxStacked and open it. To draw things, we just need to add StyleBoxes to the array. But when we add the box flat here, nothing happens. That is because it doesn't know it needs a redraw. If we resize the inspector, it will call up the draw function and we can finally see our box. But then we need to do that each time we change things, which is not very ideal. So to fix that, we are going to add a setter for the StyleBoxes array and call emitChanged. This will trigger the resource changed signal and tell the node it needs a redraw. Calling the emitChanged here will update the UI when we add or remove items to it. But it won't fix it when we change variables inside the StyleBoxes. To fix that, we are going to need to iterate over the array. We'll skip null elements and check if the changed signal is already connected. If it isn't, we are going to connect the StyleBox change signal to call upon the emitChanged function, so when any StyleBox changes, it propagates its signal to our class. And just like that, now everything works. We can change our StyleBoxes inside the array and everything updates. So, let's see what we can do with our new class. Create another StyleBoxFlat plus and set this one color to black. The lower index StyleBoxes are rendered first, so our StyleBox 1 here is drawn in front of the blue one, which is why we need the negative margins. Let's add a -5 to all margins so we can see behind it. Next, we can add some borders and change its color. And on our background rect, we can add another border and a rounded corner. And like that, we have an interesting double border UI panel using only the inspector. You can also use other types of StyleBoxes here, like the StyleBox texture. This is used to draw a 9-patch image, so we can put it on layer 0 and reduce the opacity of the layers in front. And now our node has a background image too. You might also like to implement the negative margins to the texture StyleBox to make better adjustments. The code will be exactly the same, just extending from texture this time and with a different class name. Now, let's see how button works and explore some more about StyleBoxes. So let's create one for the normal state of the button that we can see. We'll create a simple button with double borders and add some text. You can change the text outline in the Constants tab and the font color in the Colors tab. Now, when dealing with buttons, content margins becomes important. When it is at -1, this means it will be automatically calculated by the StyleBox, but because we have created our own StyleBox, we don't have this anymore. In the StyleBoxFlat case, for example, this will be just the border size. The content margin is to prevent the text to overflow inside the borders. If we reduce the button size, we can see this problem. So to fix this, we need to adjust the content margins to give the text some space. Unfortunately, we can't make negative content margins like we did with the expand margins. This value is hard-coded into Godot, and it will use the getStyleMargins value if negative, but currently, this function is not exposed to GDScript, so we can't do anything about it. Now, just for fun, here are some extras and some little tricks I've learned. While playing around and exploring how StyleBox works, I ended up re-implementing the whole StyleBoxFlat in GDScript. It's a bit messy, but it works. Turns out, the StyleBoxFlat works by creating a triangle array mesh to render its graphics, and that is done by its helper function drawRoundedRect. This essentially adds to the triangle mesh by passing an outer and inner rect, with the ability to add rounded corners. And the draw function uses this several times to draw the final rect. It gets a bit complicated because it needs to check for the anti-aliasing and adjust values based on the screen scaling, but in essence, it is not too complicated. And the reason you can't adjust the shadow blur is that the shadows are calculated with vertex colors. It puts the shadow color at the borders and the same transparent color outside, based on the shadow size. So to make the shadow blurred, it would need to have more points in the mesh, thus making it more expensive. But now that we can play around with this, let me show you how to improve it with just a small change. First, let's add a new export variable called gradient of type texture2D, and at the end of the draw function, if we don't have a gradient, we draw as usual, but if we do, we can pass the gradient texture to the mesh with gradient.getRid. This makes it so we have a real background image to the rect, and with that, we can create a gradient to the image, set the gradient fill to radial, put the point 1 to the top left, and the second point at the bottom right. And that can be used to give the borders an emboss effect. And with some adjustments, we can make some really cool buttons without any images now. Here's another example of building a nice looking button by using the Stackable StyleBoxes. First we create our white background with some rounded borders and a small bottom border to give it some depth. Then we create the inside area by giving it a negative margin. We set a gray small border and some rounded corners, and we got a basic button. And after adjusting a bit of the values, we get a nice button. Finally, we just need to adjust the content margins so the text fits neatly inside it. And we can keep going by making the background panel too. And to finish things off, you can use gradient textures to create a more adjustable shadow for the StyleBoxes. As we talked before, you can't control the blur of the box flat shadows, but we can create a StyleBox texture and use that as the shadow instead. So make it a gradient 2D, set it to radial, and make it start at the center. Then adjust the colors to create a circle texture. Open the subregion and click on Edit Region. Adjust the rect here so it fully fits our blob inside it. But make sure it is still a square. Then you can open the texture margin and set the 9-patch rect margins. This is the corner areas that will not stretch, so we can set 15 to all those here and add some expand margins so the shadows are outside of the rect. You can also open Edit Region again to edit the texture margins, denoted by the dashed lines. And now we can drag the shadow to layer 0 so it's behind the rect and we have it become the shadow. Now we can open the gradient texture and change its size and colors to customize how your shadows work more precisely, making them more or less blurred. And if your borders are uneven, that means you need to adjust the texture margins. So open the Edit Region again and drag the dashed lines closer. And now they are perfect. We can adjust the node size and make adjustments to the shadows. You can also increase the gradient size for more details and increase the expand margins if you want to have bigger shadows. And finally, you can create offsetted shadows by expanding the margins unevenly. But that's it. Now you know how StyleBoxes work, and you can create a much more interesting UI with Stackable StyleBoxes in your tool belt. As always, you can get the project files for all these experiments by supporting me on Patreon. I hope you liked this video, and until next time.